Hello everybody and welcome to our latest episode of our CEOs Executive Lounge series. Today we are talking with Celina Chew. Celina was born in Malaysia and studied law in Australia and Hong Kong. She spent the first 18 years of her career practicing law. After that, she transitioned her career into management at Bayer. Most recently, Celina served as president of Bayer Group Greater China. She recently returned to Perth, Australia, where she joins us today. Hello, Celine, and thank you very much for joining us in this conversation. I found that your career is very interesting, going from lawyer to president of a big European multinational in a very important market that is China. Can you tell us how was the process from one to the other?
Well, as you said, I was a lawyer for many years. Actually, I became a lawyer in Australia, and somewhere in my first or second year, I wanted to go to China to find my roots because I'm of Chinese heritage. And it was actually a journey of the heart rather than of a career move to China at the time. So that's around 1992. From there, I was very lucky that China also opened up in the early 90s at the same time, and I had a lot of opportunities to become a lawyer at one of the top firms and doing a lot of China investment work. Through that, I got involved with Bayer, and I joined Bayer as head of legal in 1997. So I was very happy being head of legal for Bayer. It was a big growth ramp-up phase for investments for Bayer in that time, and work was exciting and life was very exciting. But an opportunity came up in 2011 for me to move into management. And it wasn't something I had planned or actually even aspired to. I actually very much like being a lawyer and living in China and exploring, the fascination that was China in a very fast-growing phase. But my boss said to me one Saturday morning, this job has come up. The global board would like you to look into a role of CEO for North ASEAN based in Thailand. And originally, at first, I was not very inclined to take over the role. I was a bit reluctant. But fortunately for me, my bosses, two of them, I think at least, saw potential in me that I perhaps didn't even imagine in myself. And they guided me towards this direction. So I embraced this opportunity, and it was a very rewarding, challenging, and exciting time. Really wonderful experience.
And from there, you came to China.
Yes, that's right. I mean, the role in Southeast Asia was an important stepping stone for moving to China because the China role was a very huge step up from the North ASEAN role. It's about 10 times the business at the time. When I was offered the role on a Saturday morning, I was given 3 days to basically decide yes or no. And I originally thought about it very hard, what I thought was very rationally, and weighing up the pros and cons. And I thought, I don't think I will take over this role because actually head of legal for China was a very intense, exciting, scope of work. I decided then on Sunday morning to tell my boss I would decline. Then I thought to myself, well, I wonder why I'm declining, right? Whether it's I'm not brave enough or whether I am so afraid of not testing myself. And not only was it an idea of not being a coward, but also a question of authenticity. Because at the time, being a head of legal, I used to tell young people, especially young women, say yes. Don't worry if you're not 100% prepared. You have the capability of taking over the role and making a success out of it. So for me, it was very much an idea that I should test myself and maybe take on this role.
I remember you told me in a previous conversation that a sentence that I still have in my mind: "A life lived in fear is a life half lived." And I think you are good examples of somebody that can take risk and then accept these challenges that life presents to you. So thank you very much for sharing this story.
That phrase is, it seems to be an old Spanish proverb. The way I know it's from a movie called Strictly Ballroom, an Australian movie. It's kind of like about ballroom dancing, and it's a bit cheesy and early 90s movie. But not only does that guide me at that time when I made this decision, it was also the advice of a very good friend from high school who I spoke with. So as I mentioned, on Sunday morning, I decided not to take this role. And I called this friend and I said to her, this is the role and this is what's involved. And I'm very concerned because actually there's a lot of things I don't know how to do, a lot of things I don't like doing in it, like public speaking or managing media. I don't think it's for me, but I just wanted to share with you. And she said to me, you have to take the role. It's perfect for you. It's all the things you're anxious about in one role, and you should really face your fears, learn, grow, and move forward. And you really should do it. And I'm really very grateful to her because it was the most persuasive advice I got. And that role became a game-changing role for me, not only in terms of my career, but also for myself to know that I had the capability to overcome these fears and move to a different level of management and of skills.
So you basically learned the role of a CEO of an important company by experience, yeah? What were the main lessons you learned? What are the most important qualities for succeeding at a high-level position like the one you had?
I think the basic qualities that you need for any position, especially in leadership, are always given, right? Like competence. You need to have some skills to know what you're doing, or some street smarts. Integrity. I think it's really important that people can trust you and that you are not seen to be having your own agenda or being, sneaky or not trustworthy. I would say reliability, ability to understand what's going on and learn quickly, learning agility. But I think the role was different because, as you mentioned, it's a high-level role. And that comes with some greater responsibilities, I think. And for me, it was much more about being in service of people, of a mission, and of an organization. And the role model aspect of it was also quite important. So if you look at it in a higher-level role like this and what that entails, I think qualities such as competence become even more highlighted. You don't need to know all the nitty-gritty technical details, but you have to be competent in order to ask the right questions and to support your staff and your team to really achieve what they need to achieve. Integrity and trust is crucial because people are being led by you. So they need to be able to believe that where you're going to bring them is good for them, and you're making decisions from an area of knowledge and of being in their interest. I think also humility is really important, especially in that role, because I didn't really have the business or the management experience. It's really a matter of listening to people, understanding what I don't know, and always asking the right questions. There are lots of qualities in that package of being a high-level manager.
Very good. I remember that when we met 1 year ago, we have a long conversation in your office in Shanghai, and we have the meeting in a very nice room, yeah, with a nice view overseeing Shanghai. And later you tell me, do you want to show you my office? And you took me to a table together with all the other staff at Bayer. And later you told me that the office we have the meeting was your former office, but you prefer to be together with your people, yeah? And I think that tells a lot about your leadership style, yeah?
Yes, I think it's always good to lead by example. There's a role model aspect to that. If I'm asking people not to have an office, then I think it's also good to show that I also don't need an office. But apart from that, I also like being with the people. I think it's a nice way to get connected. You have a lot more chance to have serendipity in terms of bumping into people, hearing what's going on, seeing people's struggles or celebrating their wins. So it's always nice to be out there, I think, with the people.
You have led teams from many different countries, different cultures. What have you learned about managing a multicultural team?
Well, the first thing I learned is that I really like multicultural teams or just diverse teams. I think it is really a way of getting a bigger range of better ideas. And of course, the newness of it all, new ideas, new cultures, new thoughts are just exciting and interesting for me, very charming. But of course, multicultural teams and diverse teams generally come with their own issues because they are by definition different. And therefore, there is always some sort of tension that you need to manage out of that. So I would say that in managing multicultural teams, the first thing I would say is to celebrate the diversity, the differences, but don't stereotype. Right. When I was CEO in Thailand, I used to write for a newspaper column, or at least contribute to it, called Hi! Managers, about management topics. And one thing I wrote, one piece I wrote was called Diversity Perversity, which is about, how you hire people who are diverse, and then you spend a lot of training and time trying to make them conform, which is rather, inefficient and defeats purpose. So I think first celebrate diversity and really see, what the differences can bring you in terms of better benefits. But don't imagine that all Germans, all women are the same and have the same preferences and same sort of likes and dislikes. So not to stereotype. The second part I would say is that to be very mindful of and watchful of, the diversity tension that often exists when there's a mix of different ideas, values in a team. Just how discussions evolve, making sure that there are no language communication issues like jokes or irony or cultural norms that may cause misunderstandings. Sometimes it's also helpful to take the time to do some exercises to break down barriers, to enhance communication and understanding, sharing life stories and that sort of thing. So all those things are, I think, very important. And language also is very important. I think everyone sounds much more eloquent in their native language, and is also helpful to ensure that people have time to prepare, and that language difference is also taken into account so that they don't feel unincluded or disadvantaged because of it.
You have experience working in Hong Kong, Thailand, other Southeast Asian countries, China, working with Europeans, Germans. How do you compare doing business in all those different countries?
I think it's just very different in so many different metrics, right? I think if you look at Greater China versus North ASEAN, including Myanmar and, Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, just on every metric you can think of, there's a big difference. For example, population size, scale, culture, just business norms, familiarity with international business principles, sophistication, even infrastructure. China is, even at the time when I moved to Thailand, so teched up. You can get all sorts of digital payments, telecommunications, and that sort of thing. Whereas in Myanmar, when I first went there, I couldn't use my credit card and my mobile phone didn't work. So I think the challenges and the conditions are quite different from an external perspective, but also internally. I think, Bayer was a big multinational, but each location has its own characteristics, its own politics, its own histories, and that also adds to the mix of differences. But I think it's easy to focus on the differences, but a lot of things are the same, I think. I think in the context of Asia, Greater China, and also Southeast Asia, there is that palpable sense of opportunity, of rising middle income, middle class, of wanting to surge ahead, to develop, to be prosperous. I think that is a very exciting atmosphere to be in. I think also in Asia, of course, the cultures are quite different, but there's a hierarchical culture that is sort of present in each of the different countries I mentioned to different extents and manifests in different ways. How to communicate so that people are willing to speak up to you and maybe challenge you, the directness or indirectness of the communication, those sorts of things are also quite easily to be seen.
You mentioned in our previous discussions that disruption in China can come from anywhere. How do you prepare your staff and your organization to anticipate this?
Well, I think first you hire well. I think that's always a good start. When I was at Bayer at the time, the employee proposition was passion to innovate, power to change. And that means, if you are interested in new things, want to innovate, you like challenging the status quo, come and join Bayer and we will change the world together for the better. And that's the idea behind it. And with that, one hopes to already attract the right people, right mindset people. And with that, they are more able and willing to deal with disruption and anticipate it. But of course, when they come into the company, it's important to also make sure that the culture in the company continues to feed this and gives them a fertile ground in which they can innovate and anticipate disruption and really capitalize on it. I think we very much encourage our colleagues to adopt an outside-in approach, always be connected to externals. It's very easy in a big company like Bayer to really get very bogged down in internal topics, internal projects, internal discussions. But it's really also important to always be aware of what's happening outside. So expand your professional networks, external trainings, read widely, have new experiences. I think we also had faculty briefings from CEOs for over time, so over different topics, which is also intended to make things easier for our colleagues to encounter new ideas. On things like tech, we try to give our colleagues opportunities to try out new tech. We also ran an in-house digital health incubator called Grants for Apps, or G4A. And that was also another initiative to really maybe anticipate disruption, to see how entrepreneurs and startups were really thinking, and to get our colleagues involved with them so they could meet with them, mentor them, attend the meetups, and that whole startup space activity. I think these are some of the examples of the ways we try to ensure that our colleagues don't become complacent, and they're also looking out for disruption where it may come. I would say, though, that sometimes even though you see signals of disruption, it's very hard to work out which are relevant, real, substantial, and which are just white noise. I think that critical skill of being able to distinguish between what is worth pursuing and what's not is something that we also try to encourage our colleagues to learn. So, agile learning ideas, methodologies, also experimentation. So and just general training. So I think we try and position them well to anticipate disruption.
Do you think that the people at head office are aware of all these changes that are taking place in China?
I think head office and local country communications are always, mixed. There's always different interests and different perspectives. I think I was very lucky in that when I was heading up China, I had a board where there were 2-3 members who were very familiar with China. I think they'd lived in China, worked in China, so they were already very attuned to the pace, the speed of China, and the scope of developments and disruption. So it wasn't so problematical, I think, for me. It may well be that middle management, the levels below, are sometimes more difficult to persuade. But I think a lot of that can be addressed by getting people to come out into China to have a look. You can describe it many, many times, and it sounds, reasonably accurate. But unless you come and live here or live in China and experience it for yourself, it's very hard to explain what seems to be ad hoc chaos, but it's not really. It's an iterative, speedy, fast-changing process that depends on a complex multitude of factors. And that one only experience can really show you what it feels like.
Do you have any insight about forging a successful career in China now that you are reflecting on your experience from outside?
I think success, first of all, is what you define for yourself, whether it is a high-level position in a multinational, or a serial entrepreneur, or I don't know, facing your fears, or something else. Fulfilling your passion, finding your passion, and that sort of thing. I think the point about China is that it has an abundance of possibilities for all things, all sorts of success, and I think it's a very ripe ground in which one can really fulfill whichever path one wants to take to find success. But what is important is to come to China without preconceptions. like the ideas of what China is, either through media or through what you've read. I think coming with an open mind, having a willingness to be humble and to learn is really important. I think that's the first. Not to have rigid plans, because rigid plans never go very well in China. I think also learning about Chinese history, Chinese society and culture is really helpful to understand the context. I think especially in these days where there is so much sort of information floating around that's quite polarizing, I think to find out for yourself and do some study is also very important. I think to be optimistic, patient, to be resilient is also helpful. I think sometimes things are not always as they seem, and what seems to be very insurmountable obstacles sometimes melt away more easily than you think. I would say also just open your heart. I think, if you build trustful relationships, build strong local connections, and really come to it with open mind and open heart, I think that's probably a very good way to start.
Do you think that to have a Chinese background like you is a must, or if they do what you are telling us now is enough to be successful in this country?
Well, I think that many people with no Chinese background who are very successful. I don't think it's a must. I'm a great believer in everything can be learned as a skill. As long as you have the right mindset and you are sincere in your wish to learn.
Now you are back in Australia, yeah? What is next for your career?
Well, I made the change from corporate and from China so I could spend more time with my family after being away for 27 years. So it's been a very nice process of reconnecting and relearning what it's like to be living in Perth, Australia. I also wanted a period of reset, reflection and rest. Because once you've been embroiled in something intensively for 2-3 decades, it's always good to take a step back. I was on a webinar, I think as many people are during COVID, with a lady called Amy Herman, who talks about the art of perception. And she said, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Meaning that I can look at you, but if I look at you with different lenses, you may seem quite different. And I think that is a very precious opportunity I have now to really reflect with different eyes, because I'm now out of that context in a different context. I think if I were to think about next steps, I think board roles would be quite interesting. Especially now with this post-COVID pivot and companies and businesses looking at, purpose and resetting themselves and what it really means to have a positive impact in society, stakeholder interest versus shareholder interest. I think that's a very interesting area to be in, and it would also give me a chance to really leverage my previous experience and build on it and maybe continue to contribute and make some sort of positive impact. So those are the things I'm thinking about. Also, I think things like sustainability, social enterprise, social entrepreneurship, I think those are very interesting areas that will only develop further in the future.
For young executives coming from the Southeast Asia region who are possibly considering an MBA, what is the value proposition of coming to China for career development purposes?
Well, as I mentioned, in the context of head office, I think it's also the same for young executives. You can learn about China from afar, but it's nothing like being, in the place where it's actually happening. Or to quote the Hamilton musical, the room where it happens. You will see it in front of your eyes as it evolves and develops and changes, and you may spot opportunities that nobody else does. China is an enormous market, and it's not going to get any less important in the future. I watched your interview with Jonathan Wurtzel the other day, and he talked about the huge factor that Chinese consumers will play in the future in terms of trade, consumer trends, competition and that sort of thing. It's true, and where better to really learn about it than arriving in China and doing an MBA. So I think I would strongly encourage them to do so. And the other thing I would also mention is that a lot of MBAs and the output from them tend to be quite Western-centric, I would say, through a Western lens at least. And I think, if they have an opportunity to do an MBA in China in a Chinese Asian context, I mean, that will certainly broaden their perspective and really lend another important and precious voice to the discussions in the world about how business should be done or will be done in the future. So absolutely, if you're thinking about it, come to China and do an MBA here.
And hopefully at CBS. Thank you very much, Celine. Thank you for having the time to talk with me and share your wisdom about management and leadership with our viewers. I hope that we can see you soon in China, and please do come to CBS to visit us.
I certainly do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.